I pulled into my driveway at Riverside Meadows on a Tuesday evening around 7, completely exhausted after a brutal cross-examination that had lasted 6 hours. The sun was setting over Phoenix, Arizona, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns of our gated community. I'd been living here for 3 years, keeping my head down and paying my HOA dues on time like everyone else. What I didn't expect was to see 3 men in matching navy blue uniforms with Riverside Meadows security patches standing at the end of my driveway, blocking my path to the garage. I lowered my window as I approached, and the tallest one, a guy who looked like he'd failed the police academy physical twice, stepped forward with his hand raised. "Sir, we need you to step out of the vehicle." "Excuse me," I said, keeping my tone neutral despite the irritation already building in my chest. "Step out of the vehicle, sir. We have reason to believe you're transporting prohibited materials on HOA property." I blinked at him, then looked at his 2 companions. One was shorter, stockier, with arms crossed like he was trying to intimidate me. The third looked younger, maybe early 20s, and seemed uncomfortable with the whole situation. "Prohibited materials? What are you talking about, sir? Just step out of the car and open your trunk. This will go a lot faster if you cooperate." That's when I knew something was very wrong. I'm Zachary Walsh, and I've been a defense attorney for 12 years. I've dealt with illegal searches, Fourth Amendment violations, and power-tripping authority figures more times than I could count. But I'd never expected to face it in my own driveway. "Am I being detained?" I asked, my professional voice kicking in automatically. The tall one, whose name tag read Morrison, narrowed his eyes. "This is HOA property, sir. We have the authority to conduct searches when we have reasonable suspicion." "That's not how this works," I said calmly. "This is my private property, my driveway, my car. You have no authority to search anything without my consent, which I'm not giving you." Morrison's face reddened. "We received a complaint from the HOA board president that you've been violating community guidelines. We're authorized to investigate." "A complaint about what exactly?" "That's confidential," the stocky one chimed in. His name tag said Briggs. I felt my jaw tighten. "So let me get this straight. You want to search my vehicle based on a confidential complaint about unspecified prohibited materials, and you think that's legal? Sir, if you don't comply, we'll have to report this to the board and you could face fines." I pulled out my phone and started recording. "State your names and badge numbers for the record." Morrison stepped closer to my window, his voice dropping to what he probably thought was a threatening tone. "Put the phone away, sir." "Not a chance. You're on my property making demands." "I'm documenting this. Names and badge numbers. Now," the younger one spoke up nervously. "I'm Jake Mendez, badge 372. "Shut up, Mendez," Briggs snapped. Then to me, "You're going to regret this attitude." "Is that a threat?" I asked, making sure my phone caught every word. "Because threatening a homeowner on their own property is a great way to get fired and possibly arrested." Morrison leaned down to my window level. "We're going to search your car one way or another. Either you cooperate, or we'll get authorization from the HOA board." "The HOA board has no legal authority to authorize searches of my personal vehicle," I said slowly, like I was explaining basic concepts to a child. "This isn't a border crossing. This isn't an airport. This is my private property, and you have zero legal standing to search anything. Now step away from my car." Instead of backing off, Morrison reached for my door handle. That's when I knew things were about to escalate in a way they'd regret. "Do not touch my car," I warned. "That's your final warning." He pulled the handle anyway. My door was locked, obviously, but the intent was clear. I immediately called 911. 911, What's your emergency? This is Zachary Walsh at 4782 Riverside Drive in the Riverside Meadows community. I have 3 security guards on my property attempting to illegally search my vehicle, and one just tried to forcibly open my car door. I need police assistance immediately. Morrison's expression changed from smug to worried in about 2 seconds. Wait, you're calling the cops on us. You just attempted to forcibly enter my vehicle. That's attempted breaking and entering at minimum. So yes, I'm calling the police. Briggs pulled out his radio. We need to contact Sharon about this situation. Sharon. That would be Sharon Kensington, the HOA board president and the biggest pain in the neck this community had ever seen. A 52-year-old woman with a blonde bob haircut that never moved and an attitude that suggested everyone else was put on earth specifically to inconvenience her. I'd had run-ins with her before over the most ridiculous things. Once she'd threatened to fine me because my mailbox was 3/4 of an inch too far left from center. I'd measured it myself with her standing there, proved she was wrong, and she'd never forgiven me for the embarrassment. You're calling Sharon, I said. Perfect. Tell her to come down here too. I want everyone involved to be present when the police arrive. The dispatcher was still on the line. Sir, are you in immediate danger? Not at the moment, but I have 3 men refusing to leave my property and one attempted to break into my vehicle. I'm staying in my locked car until officers arrive. Units are on the way. Stay on the line with me. Morrison backed away from my car, finally showing some sense. This is ridiculous. We're just trying to do our jobs. Your job isn't to violate constitutional rights, I said. Your job is to patrol the community and report actual problems to actual law enforcement. What you don't get to do is play cop and conduct illegal searches. A few neighbors had started to gather, curious about the commotion. I saw Mrs. Patterson from across the street standing on her lawn, phone out, probably filming too. Good. More evidence. 5 minutes later, Sharon's white Mercedes SUV came barreling down the street and screeched to a halt behind the security guards. She got out wearing white capri pants and a floral blouse, her face already twisted in anger before she even knew what was happening. What is going on here? She demanded, stomping toward my car in her designer sandals. Miss Kensington, I said through my partially opened window, your security team just attempted to conduct an illegal search of my vehicle and tried to forcibly enter it when I refused. Illegal, she looked at Morrison. What is he talking about? Morrison shifted uncomfortably. We received your complaint about possible prohibited materials and came to investigate like you asked. My eyebrows shot up. So this was your idea, Sharon. Don't you Sharon me, she snapped. It's Miss Kensington to you. And yes, I've seen you bringing large cases and bags into your home at odd hours. For all we know, you're running some kind of illegal operation. I actually laughed. Large cases? You mean my work briefcase and gym bag? Whatever you're hiding, we have every right to inspect. The HOA bylaws clearly state that we can enforce community standards. The bylaws can't override constitutional law, I said. And I'm still on the phone with 911, so please, keep talking. Her eyes widened, and for a moment she looked uncertain. Then her default setting kicked back in. You're being dramatic. This is a simple community matter. Attempting to illegally search my car and trying to break into it is not a community matter. It's a criminal matter. 2 Phoenix Police Department cruisers turned onto the street, lights flashing. Sharon's face went pale. You actually called the police. I told you I did. Maybe you should have listened. The officers parked and approached, and I finally felt comfortable enough to open my door and step out, keeping my phone recording. The first officer, a woman in her mid-30s with her dark hair pulled back in a tight bun, walked up with her hand near her belt but not threatening. "I'm Officer Rodriguez, who called about an attempted break-in." "I did, officer. Zachary Walsh. I'm the homeowner here." I gestured to the 3 security guards. These 3 attempted to force me to allow them to search my vehicle without cause, and that one, I pointed to Morrison, tried to open my car door forcibly when I refused. Officer Rodriguez looked at Morrison. "That true?" "We had a complaint from the HOA president about suspicious activity," Morrison said defensively. "We were just following orders." The second officer, a tall man with graying temples whose nameplate read Chen, stepped forward. "Following orders to do what exactly?" "To search his vehicle for prohibited materials," Briggs said. Officer Chen turned to me. "Did you give them permission to search your vehicle?" "Absolutely not. I explicitly refused and told them they had no legal authority. That's when Morrison tried to open my door." Officer Rodriguez addressed Sharon. "You're the HOA president." "Yes, and this is being blown completely out of proportion. We simply wanted to ensure he wasn't violating our community guidelines by searching his personal vehicle on his property." Officer Chen said, his tone suggesting he already knew how ridiculous that sounded. "The HOA has certain powers," Sharon insisted. "Not this power," I interjected. "And I practice defense law, officers. I know exactly what rights I have and what rights they've just violated." Officer Rodriguez's expression shifted slightly. She recognized the implications. "You're an attorney." "Defense attorney, yes. 12 years. I handle constitutional violations regularly, and this is textbook Fourth Amendment violation plus attempted breaking and entering." Sharon's face was turning red. "This is absurd. We're the HOA. We have authority here." "Madam," Officer Chen said firmly, "the HOA has no authority to conduct searches of personal property or vehicles. That's not how any of this works. But the bylaws." "The bylaws don't trump federal constitutional rights or state law," I said. "And if you'd bothered to have your bylaws reviewed by an actual attorney instead of making up your own interpretations, you'd know that." Morrison stepped forward. "Look, maybe we got a little aggressive, but we were trying to help. There've been complaints." "Complaints about what?" Officer Rodriguez asked. "What exactly was Mr. Walsh suspected of?" Morrison looked at Sharon, who pressed her lips together tightly. "Finally," she said, "I saw him bringing large items into his home late at night. It looked suspicious." "Large items like what?" I asked. "Please describe them." "Black cases, heavy-looking bags, multiple times over the past few weeks." I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my photos. "You mean like this?" I showed the officers a picture from 2 weeks ago of me loading my trial bags into my car. Large black litigation bags on wheels that every trial attorney in America used. "These are my work materials. Case files, evidence binders, legal documents." I was working on a major trial that just concluded today, actually. I've been bringing work home because I've been putting in 12 to 14-hour days. Officer Chen looked at the photo, then at Sharon. "You called security to search his car because he was bringing work home." "I didn't know what was in those bags," Sharon said defensively. "So you assumed criminal activity and ordered an illegal search," I said. "That's quite a leap." Officer Rodriguez turned to the 3 security guards, who specifically tried to open the car door. Mendez, the young one, pointed at Morrison without hesitation. Morrison shot him a deadly look. "I barely touched it," Morrison protested. "I have video evidence showing otherwise," I said, holding up my phone. "And at least one neighbor also recorded it, Mrs. Patterson across the street." Officer Rodriguez took down everyone's information, while Officer Chen walked over to interview Mrs. Patterson. When he came back, he nodded to his partner. Her video shows Morrison pulling on the door handle multiple times. "I want to press charges," I said clearly. "Attempted breaking and entering, trespassing after I ordered them off my property, and harassment. And I'll be filing a civil suit against the HOA and these three individually." Sharon gasped. "You can't be serious." "Deadly serious. You violated my constitutional rights, ordered security to conduct an illegal search, and created a hostile living environment. Any first-year law student could win this case." Officer Rodriguez was writing in her notepad. "Mr. Morrison, I need you to understand that what you did constitutes attempted breaking and entering. Even if you were acting on orders, you don't have legal authority to force entry into someone's vehicle." "We weren't forcing anything," Morrison insisted, but his voice had lost its earlier confidence. "Your own colleague's testimony and video evidence says otherwise," Officer Chen said. "Here's what's going to happen. We're going to write up a report, and the district attorney will review it for charges. In the meantime, I strongly suggest you three stay away from Mr. Walsh's property." I turned to Sharon. "And I'll be filing formal complaints with the HOA board about your conduct. I'm sure the other board members will be thrilled to learn you've exposed the association to massive liability." "You can't threaten me," Sharon said, but her voice wavered. "That's not a threat. It's a statement of fact. You ordered an illegal action that violated my rights. The HOA's insurance is going to love hearing about this." The officers finished taking statements and photographing my car and the scene. Morrison, Briggs, and Mendez were given citations for trespassing, and Morrison received an additional citation for attempted breaking and entering. Sharon was told that while she couldn't be cited directly, her role in ordering the search would be included in the report. As the officers were leaving, Officer Rodriguez handed me her card. "You'll get a copy of the report within 72 hours. Given your profession, I assume you know how to follow up if you want to pursue charges." "I do, thank you, officer." After everyone had cleared out, I finally pulled into my garage, carried my actual work bags inside, and poured myself a very large bourbon. My phone rang almost immediately. It was my best friend and colleague, Marcus Chen, who practiced family law in the same building where I had my office. "You're not going to believe what just happened," I said, launching into the story. Marcus listened, occasionally interjecting with disbelieving comments. When I finished, he was laughing. "Only you could turn coming home from work into a constitutional crisis. I didn't do anything except refuse an illegal search." "I know, man, but seriously, the HOA president had security try to search your car. What did she think was in there?" "Apparently my litigation bags looked suspicious." "Your litigation bags, the ones that say Walsh Legal Defense on the side in big white letters, those would be the ones." Marcus laughed harder. "Oh man, she's going to get destroyed. You're actually going to sue?" "Absolutely. This isn't just about me. If they're willing to do this to an attorney who knows better, imagine what they've done to residents who don't know their rights. This is a pattern waiting to be exposed. You're going to war with your HOA. They started it. I'm just finishing it." The next morning, I drafted formal complaints to the HOA board, detailing the previous night's events and Sharon's role in ordering the illegal search. I also sent a preservation of evidence letter to the HOA, their insurance company, and the security company, demanding they preserve all records, communications, videos, and documents related to the incident. By noon, I'd filed a civil rights lawsuit in federal court under 42 U.S.C. Section 1983 for violation of my Fourth Amendment rights, naming Sharon Kensington personally, the HOA board, and the 3 security guards as defendants. I also named the security company itself, Sentinel Security Solutions, for inadequate training and supervision. My phone started ringing off the hook within hours. First was Harold Mitchum, one of the other board members, a retired accountant who'd always seemed reasonable. "Zachary, I just got your complaint email. Please tell me this is exaggerated." "It's not. I have video evidence, witness statements, and a police report. Sharon ordered security to search your car, based on her seeing me bring work bags into my house. She decided that was suspicious enough to violate my constitutional rights." Harold groaned. "We're going to get sued into oblivion, aren't we?" "You're already being sued. I filed this morning in federal court." The silence on the other end was deafening. Finally, Harold said, "Federal court. Fourth Amendment violation. Civil rights case. Yes, federal court. How much are you suing for?" "Compensatory and punitive damages to be determined at trial, but I'm thinking we start at $500,000 and see where it goes." Another long silence. "Zachary, can we talk about this? Maybe work something out?" My door's open for settlement discussions, but I'm not dropping the suit. What happened last night can't be ignored or brushed under the rug. Sharon abused her position, and those security guards need to face consequences. She's going to fight this. You know how she is. Let her fight. I have video evidence, police reports, witness testimony, and the law on my side. This is the most open and shut case I've seen in years." Harold sighed heavily. "I'll talk to the board. We're calling an emergency meeting tonight. Make sure it's properly noticed and documented. Everything by the book from here on out." That evening, I received a certified letter from the HOA's attorney, a guy named Douglas Pemberton from a small general practice firm in Scottsdale. The letter was full of bluster about how I was overreacting and should dismiss my frivolous lawsuit. I called Pemberton's office the next morning. "Mr. Pemberton, this is Zachary Walsh returning your letter." "Mr. Walsh, yes, I trust you've reconsidered this unnecessary legal action." "Not even slightly, but I wanted to give you some friendly advice, attorney to attorney." "I don't need advice from you. You might want to reconsider that attitude. I've been practicing defense law for 12 years, and I handle civil rights cases regularly. Your clients violated my Fourth Amendment rights on video after I explicitly refused consent, and one of them attempted to forcibly enter my vehicle. There is no defense here. The HOA was acting within its authority. The HOA has no authority to conduct warrantless searches of personal vehicles. Zero. None. And if you advise them otherwise, you've committed malpractice." Pemberton's voice got defensive. "The bylaws give the HOA broad enforcement powers. The bylaws can't override constitutional law." I really can't believe I have to explain this to another attorney. "Have you even read the Fourth Amendment? Don't condescend to me. Then don't give me a reason to. Your clients are exposed to massive liability. The smart play here is to settle quickly, fire the people responsible, and implement policy changes to prevent this from happening again. If you fight this and you will lose, the damages are going to be substantially higher." "We'll see about that," Pemberton said and hung up. I called Marcus. "Their attorney is an idiot. What happened? He thinks the HOA bylaws give them search authority. He's actually going to fight this. Then he's going to get crushed and probably sued for malpractice by his own clients when this is over." That's what I told him. Over the next week, things escalated quickly. Sharon started a whisper campaign in the neighborhood, telling anyone who'd listen that I was a troublemaker trying to destroy the community. Several neighbors approached me with their own stories of HOA overreach. Mrs. Patterson told me about being fined $500 for having a garden gnome that was too whimsical for the community's aesthetic standards. A guy named Tom Rodriguez from 2 streets over described how security had entered his backyard without permission to measure his shed, claiming they needed to verify it met size restrictions. Another neighbor, Jennifer Hallbrook, said Sharon had threatened her with daily fines because her teenage son's car was too old and ugly for the neighborhood. I started documenting everything. Each neighbor who came forward got a detailed interview, and I took notes on their experiences. A pattern was emerging. Sharon had been running the HOA like her personal fiefdom for years, and the security company had been acting as her enforcement arm, often overstepping legal boundaries. 10 days after the incident, I received notice that the district attorney's office had decided to prosecute Morrison for attempted breaking and entering. The trespassing charges against all 3 guards were also moving forward. I immediately sent a supplemental filing to the court in my civil case, attaching the criminal charges as evidence of the severity of the violations. The HOA board finally got smart and held a special meeting. I attended, walking into the community center where about 40 other residents had gathered. Sharon sat at the head table with Harold Mitchum, board treasurer Patricia Simmons, and secretary Robert Chen. The other 2 board members, younger residents who'd been elected mostly to fill seats, looked distinctly uncomfortable. Sharon called the meeting to order and immediately went on the offensive. "We're here tonight because of frivolous accusations being made against this board and our security team." "Point of order," I said, standing up. "There's nothing frivolous about a federal lawsuit with video evidence." "You're not recognized to speak," Sharon snapped. Harold cleared his throat. "Actually, Sharon, this meeting is about his complaint. He should be allowed to speak." "Fine. Say your piece and sit down." I walked to the front of the room. What happened 10 days ago wasn't a misunderstanding or an overreaction. It was a clear violation of my constitutional rights, ordered by the board president and carried out by security guards who either didn't know the law or didn't care. I was on my own property, my own driveway, and I was told to submit to a search of my personal vehicle based on nothing more than Sharon's suspicion that my work bags looked concerning. Someone in the audience called out, "What kind of bags?" "Litigation bags. I'm a defense attorney. I bring case files and legal documents home. They're black rolling bags with my law firm's name printed on them in large white letters." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Sharon's face reddened. "I didn't know what was in those bags. You didn't ask. You didn't approach me like a reasonable person. You immediately assumed criminal activity and ordered security to search my car. When I refused, which is my constitutional right, one of your guards tried to force open my car door." Patricia Simmons spoke up. "Do you have proof of this?" I pulled out my phone and connected it to the room's projector system. "I have video. And before you ask, yes, I verified with the police that releasing this publicly won't impact the criminal case." The video played on the screen. The room went silent as everyone watched Morrison approach my car, demand I exit, refuse to explain the basis for the search, and then try to open my door. Sharon's voice could be heard clearly when she arrived, admitting she'd ordered the search based on seeing me bring large cases into my home. When the video ended, the room erupted. Multiple people started shouting questions. Harold banged the gavel for order. Everyone calmed down, one at a time. Tom Rodriguez stood up. "If they did this to Zachary, an attorney who knows his rights, what else have they been doing to the rest of us?" That opened the floodgates. Person after person stood up describing incidents of security overreach, unreasonable fines, threats, and intimidation. Sharon tried to maintain control, but it was clear she'd lost the room. Mrs. Patterson stood up, her voice shaking with anger. You fined me $500 over a garden gnome. A gnome. And when I refused to pay, you threatened to put a lien on my house. The community has aesthetic standards, Sharon said weakly. Aesthetic standards don't give you the right to act like a dictator, someone else shouted. Harold banged the gavel again. Sharon, I think we need to discuss your conduct as board president. My conduct. I've been protecting this community. You've been violating people's rights, I said. And now the HOA is facing a federal lawsuit because of it. Your insurance company is going to be very interested in how this happened. Robert Chen, the board secretary, spoke up. I move that we suspend Sharon Kensington from her duties as board president pending a full investigation into these allegations. Second, Patricia said immediately. You can't do this, Sharon said, standing up. I've dedicated years to this community. All in favor? Harold asked. 4 hands went up. Only Sharon stayed down. Motion carries. Sharon, you're suspended effective immediately. We'll schedule a hearing to determine if removal is appropriate. Sharon grabbed her papers and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. The room applauded. Harold looked exhausted. Zachary, can we talk about your lawsuit? We can talk, but I'm not dismissing it. What would it take to settle? 3 things. 1. Morrison, Briggs, and Mendez need to be fired immediately. And the HOA needs to terminate its contract with Sentinel Security Solutions, unless they implement comprehensive training on constitutional rights and legal boundaries. 2. The HOA needs to implement policy changes ensuring this never happens again, including a requirement that all enforcement actions be reviewed by legal counsel before implementation. 3. Monetary compensation for the violation of my rights and emotional distress. How much money? $50,000, and that's a steep discount from what I could get at trial, Patricia whistled. That's going to hurt. It should hurt. What happened was serious. And frankly, if you'd gone to trial, I'd have asked for $500,000 and probably gotten it. Harold rubbed his face. I need to talk to the board and our insurance company. Can you give us a week? You have 3 days. After that, we proceed to discovery, and I start deposing everyone involved, including every board member about how much they knew about Sharon's pattern of behavior. The meeting adjourned, and several neighbors came up to thank me. Tom Rodriguez shook my hand firmly. You did what a lot of us have wanted to do for years. If you have documentation of your experiences, I might be able to help you file complaints or even separate lawsuits. Seriously. If there's a pattern of rights violations, everyone affected deserves compensation. Over the next 2 days, my phone and email were flooded with messages from neighbors documenting their experiences with Sharon and the security team. I compiled everything into a detailed report showing at least 15 separate incidents of potential rights violations over the past 3 years. The pattern was damning. Sharon would identify something she personally disliked, declare it a violation of community standards, and order security to enforce her interpretation of the bylaws, often through intimidation and threats. On the 3rd day, Harold called me. We've talked to the insurance company. They're advising us to settle. Smart. They've agreed to your terms. $50,000, the policy changes, and the security company is fired. We're bringing in a new company next week. What about Morrison, Briggs, and Mendez? All 3 have been terminated. Morrison's probably going to lose his security license after the criminal conviction. Good. I'll have my assistant draft a settlement agreement. I want it signed by all board members and notarized. Done. Zachary, for what it's worth, I'm sorry this happened. It shouldn't have happened in the first place. Make sure whatever new policies you implement have teeth, and get a real HOA attorney, not some general practitioner who doesn't know constitutional law. The settlement was finalized within a week. I received $50,000, which I promptly split, keeping $20,000 and distributing the rest to neighbors who documented their own experiences with HOA overreach. It wasn't much for each person, but it felt right. The criminal case against Morrison proceeded. He eventually pleaded guilty to attempted breaking and entering and received probation, community service, and a permanent mark on his record that would prevent him from working security again. Briggs and Mendez both pleaded guilty to trespassing and received fines and community service. Sharon Kensington was formally removed as HOA board president at a hearing where over 60 residents showed up to testify about her conduct. She tried to defend herself, claiming she'd only been trying to maintain property values, but when I played a compilation of videos and read statements from affected residents, the board voted unanimously to remove her. She was also banned from running for the board again for 5 years. Sentinel Security Solutions lost their contract with Riverside Meadows, and after I quietly shared my documentation with some attorney friends, ended up facing lawsuits from 3 other HOAs where similar incidents had occurred. The company folded within 6 months. The new HOA board implemented sweeping changes. They hired a legitimate HOA attorney who specialized in community association law and understood constitutional limitations. They created a grievance process for residents to challenge enforcement actions. They brought in a new security company with strict protocols and comprehensive training. Most importantly, they adopted a policy requiring board approval for any enforcement action beyond standard security patrols, and that approval had to be based on actual violations of clearly defined rules, not subjective aesthetic judgments. A few months later, I was in my backyard grilling dinner when Harold Mitchum walked over from his house 3 doors down. "Evening, Zachary. Got a minute?" "Sure, what's up?" "I wanted to thank you, actually. What you did, standing up to Sharon and forcing these changes, it's made this a better place to live. People aren't afraid anymore. That's good to hear. We're having a community barbecue next month. You should come. I think a lot of people would like to thank you personally." I smiled. "I'll be there." Harold left, and I flipped the burgers on my grill, thinking about how a simple drive home from work had turned into a months-long battle that fundamentally changed my community. It hadn't been fun, and there'd been moments where I'd questioned whether it was worth the stress and conflict. But seeing neighbors no longer afraid to put up garden gnomes or park their older cars in their driveways or bring work home without fear of harassment made it worthwhile. My phone buzzed. Marcus was texting, "Drinks tonight, need to hear how your HOA war ended." I texted back, "Can't tonight, grilling at home, come over if you want." 20 minutes later, Marcus showed up with a 6-pack of beer and a huge grin. So I heard Sharon's completely gone, voted out unanimously. And the security guards fired. Morrison caught a criminal conviction, the other 2 got trespassing convictions, and the security company went under. Marcus whistled. "You completely dismantled them." "They dismantled themselves. I just documented it and filed the paperwork." "Don't be modest. You went to war with your HOA and won. That's impressive." We sat on my patio, eating burgers and drinking beer, and I filled him in on all the details he hadn't already heard. The settlement, the policy changes, the community improvements, all of it. "You know what the best part is?" I said. "Other HOAs in the area have started implementing similar changes. Word spread about what happened here, and residents in other communities started demanding the same protections. You started a movement. I just refused an illegal search." Everything else followed from that. Marcus raised his beer. "To knowing your rights and not backing down." I clinked my bottle against his. "To constitutional law and holding people accountable." The sun set over Phoenix, casting the same long shadows across the manicured lawns as it had that evening months ago. But this time, instead of facing down security guards trying to violate my rights, I was sitting peacefully in my backyard with a friend, living in a community that had learned an expensive but important lesson about the limits of authority and the importance of respecting individual rights. A week later, I got a call from a reporter at the Phoenix Tribune who'd heard about the case and wanted to do a story. I declined, not wanting to turn this into a media circus, but I did agree to provide her with general information about HOA overreach and what residents should know about their rights. The article ran without naming me specifically, but it detailed the incident and the resulting changes, presenting it as a cautionary tale for both HOAs and residents. The article sparked interest from other residents experiencing similar problems. I ended up giving a free seminar at the local library about constitutional rights in HOA communities, which drew over 100 people. I explained the Fourth Amendment, discussed the limits of HOA authority, and provided practical advice on how to push back against overreach. The most important thing to remember, I told the crowd, is that HOA bylaws are contracts. They're not laws. They can't override your constitutional rights or state law. If an HOA tells you they can search your property without permission, they're wrong. If they threaten you with fines for exercising your legal rights, they're wrong. And if they try to intimidate you into compliance, document everything and consult an attorney. An older woman in the front row raised her hand. What if we can't afford an attorney? Many civil rights attorneys work on contingency, meaning they only get paid if you win. And cases like these, with clear violations and video evidence, are attractive to attorneys because they're winnable. Also, organizations like the HOA sometimes take HOA cases if they involve significant rights violations. Another person asked, "What should we do if security tries to search our car?" Exactly what I did. Refuse consent clearly and unambiguously. Record the interaction if possible. Call the police if they persist or threaten you. Stay calm and don't get physical, but don't back down. The law is on your side. The seminar ended with a question and answer session that ran 30 minutes over time. People were hungry for information, for validation that their experiences with overbearing HOAs weren't acceptable. I handed out a resource sheet I'd prepared with legal citations, contact information for civil rights organizations, and tips for documenting violations. Driving home, I felt a sense of satisfaction that went beyond winning my own case. Real change was happening, and it was spreading beyond just my community. That was worth more than any settlement check. Back at Riverside Meadows, life had settled into a comfortable rhythm. The new security company, Guardian Community Services, was professional and respectful. They patrolled the neighborhood, responded to actual problems like suspicious vehicles or noise complaints, and stayed well within their legal authority. The guards I'd encountered were friendly and professional, and several of them told me they'd received extensive training on constitutional rights and community relations, specifically because of what had happened with Sentinel Security. Harold Mitchum had taken over as interim board president and was doing an excellent job. The board meetings were now productive discussions rather than Sharon dictating orders. Resident satisfaction surveys showed dramatic improvement. Property values, ironically, had actually increased because people felt better about living in the community. About 6 months after everything concluded, I was checking my mail when I saw Sharon Kensington getting into her car 2 streets over. She saw me, and for a moment we just looked at each other. I nodded politely. She turned away and got in her car without acknowledgement. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she was considering moving, unable to deal with the loss of status and the constant reminders of her downfall. I didn't take pleasure in her unhappiness, but I didn't regret what I'd done either. She'd abused her position and violated people's rights for years. The consequences were entirely self-inflicted. That evening, I was working on a brief for a client when my phone rang. It was Patricia Simmons from the HOA board. "Zachary, sorry to bother you at night." "No problem, what's up? The board has been discussing something, and we wanted to run it by you. We're considering creating a resident advisory committee to help guide policy decisions and provide oversight for the board. We'd like you to chair it." I hesitated. I appreciate the offer, but I don't want to get too involved in HOA politics. It wouldn't be political. We need someone who understands the law and isn't afraid to speak up when something's wrong. You'd basically be our conscience, making sure we don't drift back into the bad old habits. How much time commitment? 1 meeting a month, maybe 2 hours. Plus being available for consultation if questions come up. I thought about it. The changes we'd implemented were good, but they needed to be maintained and reinforced. Having a formal role might actually be helpful. Let me think about it for a few days. Take your time. But we really hope you'll say yes. I discussed it with Marcus over lunch the next day. Should I do it? Do you want to? Part of me does. I don't want to see things slide back to how they were, but part of me just wants to live in peace and not deal with HOA drama. Marcus laughed. When have you ever chosen peace over fighting for what's right? Fair point. You've already invested this much. You might as well see it through and make sure the changes stick. I called Patricia back that evening. I'll do it, but on one condition. The advisory committee has to have real authority to flag concerns and pause enforcement actions pending review. I'm not going to be a rubber stamp. That's exactly what we want. The board votes on whether to accept the committee's recommendations, but you'll have the authority to stop anything that looks questionable until there's been a full review. Then yes, I'll chair the committee. The Resident Advisory Committee held its first meeting a month later. We had 7 members. Myself, Mrs. Patterson, Tom Rodriguez, 2 other residents who'd been vocal about HOA reform, and 2 newer residents who wanted to get involved. Our first order of business was reviewing the updated bylaws and enforcement policies to identify any remaining problems or ambiguities. We found several issues. Some rules were written vaguely enough that they could be interpreted broadly, creating opportunities for abuse. We recommended specific language changes to make the rules clearer and more objective. The board adopted all our recommendations. We also created a complaint process for residents who felt they'd been treated unfairly. Any enforcement action could be appealed to the advisory committee, which would review the facts and make a recommendation to the board. In the first 6 months, we handled 12 appeals. 8 of them, we sided with the homeowner, finding that the enforcement action was either not supported by the bylaws or was applied inconsistently. The board accepted our recommendations in every case. The transformation was remarkable. Riverside Meadows went from being a community where residents feared their HOA to one where people felt heard and respected. The hostile relationship between residents and the board evolved into something collaborative. People started volunteering for committees and attending meetings not out of fear, but because they wanted to contribute. A year after the incident, I was sitting on my patio with a glass of wine, watching the sunset, when Jennifer Holbrook from down the street walked by with her son. The teenager's older car was parked proudly in their driveway, no longer a source of anxiety. "Evening, Zachary," Jennifer called out. "Evening, how are you both?" "Great. Tyler got accepted to Arizona State. Congratulations, Tyler, the kid grinned. Thanks. And thanks for, everything. My mom told me about how she was being harassed about my car. That was really stressing her out. Everyone deserves to live in their home without constant threats and intimidation. They walked on, and I sipped my wine, reflecting on the journey. What had started as a simple refusal to allow an illegal search had rippled outward, transforming an entire community and inspiring changes in others. It hadn't been easy, and there had been costs in time, stress, and money, even with the settlement. But looking at neighbors walking their dogs without fear, kids playing without someone timing how long they stayed outside, residents displaying personal touches like garden decorations and seasonal flags, it was clear that it had been worth it. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. HOA meeting tonight, I texted back. Advisory committee, yeah, should be quick though. Want to grab dinner after, sure. The advisory committee meeting was indeed quick. We reviewed 3 minor enforcement actions, all of which were straightforward and appropriate. A resident had left their trash cans visible from the street for 3 days past pickup. Another had started a renovation project without submitting the required architectural review application. And a third had been playing loud music past quiet hours. All legitimate issues, handled appropriately by security and the board. We signed off on all 3. Harold walked me out after the meeting. When all this started, I thought it was going to destroy the community. Instead, it saved it. It didn't have to get as far as it did. If Sharon had just acted reasonably from the start, none of this would have been necessary. True. But sometimes you need someone willing to stand up and fight to create real change. A lot of us knew things were wrong, but we didn't have the courage or knowledge to challenge it. You found the courage eventually. That's what matters. We shook hands, and I headed to meet Marcus at our favorite Mexican restaurant in downtown Phoenix. Over tacos and margaritas, he asked me if I'd do anything differently. Honestly, no. I stood up for my rights, held people accountable, and created positive change. That's exactly what I want to do in that situation, even knowing how much stress and conflict it caused. Even then, some things are worth fighting for, and constitutional rights are at the top of that list. Marcus raised his margarita. To fighting the good fight. And winning, I added, clinking glasses with him. The criminal cases had all concluded months earlier. Morrison's conviction stood, and he'd lost his security license as expected. Briggs had completed his community service and paid his fines, and last I heard, he was working construction. Mendez, the young one who'd seemed uncomfortable with the whole thing from the start, had actually reached out to me a few months back. Mr. Walsh, this is Jake Mendez. I was one of the security guards that night. I remember. I just wanted to apologize. I knew what we were doing was wrong, but I was new and didn't want to rock the boat. I should have spoken up. You pointed out Morrison when the police asked who tried to open the door. That took some courage. After everything happened, I quit security work. I'm studying criminal justice at community college now. I want to do things right. That's good to hear, Jake. Good luck with your studies. Thank you, sir, and again, I'm really sorry. That conversation had stuck with me. Not everyone involved had been malicious. Some had just been following orders without thinking through the implications. But that's how rights violations often happen. Ordinary people doing what they're told without questioning whether it's legal or right. 2 years after the incident, Riverside Meadows was unrecognizable from the community. It had been under Sharon's leadership. The Resident Advisory Committee was functioning well. The board was responsive and transparent. The security company maintained professionalism. Fines were rare and only issued for clear, objective violations. Property values had increased 15%, higher than comparable communities in the area. I eventually stepped down as chair of the advisory committee, feeling confident that the systems we'd put in place were self-sustaining. Tom Rodriguez took over, and he was doing an excellent job. I remained as a regular member, attending monthly meetings and providing input when needed, but the day-to-day oversight was in capable hands. The broader impact continued to spread. The Phoenix Tribune article had been picked up by other news outlets, and similar stories started appearing about HOA reform movements across Arizona and in other states. Several state legislatures began considering bills to clarify the limits of HOA authority and strengthen homeowner protections. Arizona passed a law explicitly prohibiting HOAs from conducting searches of personal property without consent and imposing penalties for violations. I was invited to testify before the state legislature's committee considering the bill. I told them about my experience, showed the video, and explained how common these violations were. This isn't just about one bad HOA president, I told the committee. It's about a systemic problem where HOAs have been allowed to operate with minimal oversight and unclear boundaries. Homeowners often don't know their rights, and HOAs exploit that ignorance. Clear statutory protections will help both homeowners and well-meaning HOAs by establishing bright-line rules that everyone can follow. The bill passed with bipartisan support and was signed into law 6 months later. I framed a copy of the law and hung it in my office, a reminder that standing up for your rights can create change that extends far beyond your individual case. 3 years after that night in my driveway, I was packing up my office for the day when my paralegal, Sandra, knocked on my door. "You have a visitor," says it's personal, not professional. I looked up to see Harold Mitchum standing in the doorway. "Harold, what brings you downtown? Had some business nearby and thought I'd stop in. Got a minute?" "Sure, come in." Harold sat down and got straight to the point. "The board wants to do something to recognize what you did for the community. We're dedicating the new community park and we'd like to name it in your honor." I held up my hand. "Absolutely not. Hear me out. What you did changed everything. You stood up when no one else would, and you made our community a better place. People want to recognize that. I appreciate the sentiment, but I don't want a park named after me. I was just defending my rights. Anyone else would have done the same. But they didn't. You did. And your actions inspired dozens of other people to stand up too." I thought for a moment. "How about this? Instead of naming it after me, call it Wrights Park or Liberty Commons or something that represents what happened. Make it about the principle, not the person." Harold considered this. "Constitutional Commons. Perfect. That works. The board will probably still want to put up a plaque explaining the history. As long as the focus is on the community coming together to protect rights, not on me personally, I can live with that." Harold smiled. "Deal." "The dedication ceremony is next month. You'll come, right?" "I'll be there." The dedication ceremony for Constitutional Commons was held on a beautiful Saturday morning. Over 200 residents attended, along with local media and some state legislators who'd worked on the HOA reform bill. The park itself was beautiful, with walking paths, a playground, picnic areas, and a small amphitheater. The plaque read, "Constitutional Commons, dedicated to the principle that homeowner associations exist to serve their communities, not to infringe upon the rights of residents. May this space remind us that standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult, creates lasting positive change." Harold gave a speech about the transformation of the community. Patricia Simmons talked about the importance of accountability and transparency. Several residents shared their own stories of how the changes had improved their lives. Then Harold called me up to speak. I kept it brief. 3 years ago, I came home from work and refused to allow an illegal search of my car. That simple act of defending my rights set in motion a series of events that changed this community. But I didn't do it alone. Every resident who came forward with their own story, every board member who supported reform, every neighbor who demanded better, you all created this change. This park represents what we can accomplish when we come together to defend our rights and hold those in authority accountable. Thank you for your courage and your commitment to making this a community where everyone's rights are respected. The crowd applauded and I stepped down, relieved that the focus remained on the collective achievement rather than on me personally. After the ceremony, I spent an hour talking with residents, some of whom I'd never met before. They thanked me, shared their stories, and expressed hope that the changes would be permanent. As the crowd dispersed, I found myself standing in the center of the new park, looking around at families playing, neighbors talking, and kids running around without anyone timing them or threatening fines for being too loud. This was what I'd fought for. A community where people could live without fear, where authority was exercised responsibly, and where rights were respected. Marcus walked up beside me. "You did good, man. We all did. Still, it started with you refusing to back down. Not everyone has that in them. Everyone should. That's the point. Standing up for your rights shouldn't be exceptional. It should be normal. Maybe after what happened here, it will be." I hoped he was right. The legal system depends on people knowing and defending their rights. When we allow those rights to be eroded through fear, ignorance, or convenience, we lose something essential. My case had been about a car search, but it represented something larger. The fundamental principle that our rights don't disappear just because we live in a community with an HOA. As I drove home that evening, I passed the entrance to Riverside Meadows, with its well-maintained landscaping and security gate. The guard on duty, a professional from Guardian Community Services, waved me through with a friendly smile. No demands to search anything, no suspicious glares, just basic courtesy and respect. I parked in my driveway, the same spot where everything had started 3 years earlier, and carried my litigation bags into the house without giving it a second thought. No one was watching. No one was suspicious. No one was preparing to violate my rights. It was just a regular evening in a community that had learned a hard but important lesson about the limits of authority and the value of individual rights. The next morning, I was having coffee on my patio when Mrs. Patterson walked by with a new garden gnome, this one wearing a tiny graduation cap. "Morning, Zachary. What do you think?" She pointed at the gnome. "Very dignified. Celebrating something. My grandson graduated college yesterday. I wanted something to commemorate it. It's perfect, and no one's going to fine you for it," she laughed. "Can you imagine? 3 years ago, I'd have been terrified to put this out. Now I don't even think twice about it. That's how it should be." She continued her walk, and I sipped my coffee, thinking about how small victories add up to major changes. A garden gnome wasn't just a decoration anymore. It was a symbol of freedom from arbitrary authority. A teenager's older car in a driveway wasn't just transportation. It was evidence that economic intimidation no longer controlled the community. My litigation bags coming home from work weren't suspicious items. They were just tools of my trade. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my photos, finding the video from that night 3 years ago. I watched it occasionally, not out of nostalgia, but as a reminder of why the work I do matters. Defense attorneys protect rights, sometimes in courtrooms and sometimes in driveways. Every case, every client, every constitutional principle defended contributes to a society where authority has limits and individuals have protection. My practice had grown substantially over the past 3 years. Word had spread about my HOA case, and I'd become the go-to attorney for civil rights violations in Phoenix. I'd handled dozens of cases involving police misconduct, illegal searches, First Amendment violations, and yes, more HOA overreach. Each case reinforced my belief that fighting for rights, even when it's difficult or unpopular, is essential work. But the Riverside Meadows case remained special because it had started as my own experience. I hadn't been defending a client, I'd been defending myself. That personal investment had driven me to be thorough, aggressive, and uncompromising in ways that benefited not just me but an entire community. As I finished my coffee and prepared to head into the office for a Monday morning meeting with a new client, I thought about the advice I'd give to anyone facing a similar situation. Know your rights. Document everything. Don't back down when you're in the right. Seek help from people who understand the law. And remember that standing up for yourself often creates positive change for others too. The sun rose higher over Phoenix, beginning another hot day in the desert. I locked my house, got in my car and backed out of my driveway without incident, just like I did every morning. But unlike 3 years ago, I now lived in a community where that simple act was protected by clear policies, professional security, and a board that understood the limits of its authority. Morrison, Briggs, and Mendez were long gone, their careers in security over. Sharon Kensington had eventually moved to a different community, unable to cope with her loss of power and status. The HOA had paid $50,000 and implemented sweeping reforms. And I'd gained something more valuable than money: the satisfaction of knowing I'd stood up for what was right and created lasting positive change. As I drove through the community gates and headed toward downtown Phoenix, I smiled, remembering the fear in Morrison's eyes when I'd called the police, the shock in Sharon's face when she'd realized the consequences of her actions, and the gratitude in my neighbors' voices when they'd thanked me for fighting back. It had been a long, difficult battle, but absolutely worth every moment. The Constitution promises us rights, but those rights only mean something if we're willing to defend them. Sometimes that defense happens in the Supreme Court over monumental issues. Sometimes it happens in a driveway over a refused car search. Both matter. Both contribute to the ongoing project of maintaining a free society where authority has limits and individuals have protection. I'd done my part in my driveway 3 years ago. And I'd continue doing my part in courtrooms and hearing rooms for years to come. Because that's what defense attorneys do. We stand between authority and the individual, ensuring that power is exercised lawfully, and that rights are more than just words on paper. The HOA had tried to search my car. I'd said no, and that simple refusal had changed everything.